But basically there are things in there that I'm just like, ugh, you don't have to be like slightly toxic. Just be a good dude who's also a dog. That's fine. Hi everyone, my name is Jayla. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the books that I've been reading lately because, oh my god, I've been reading. We never thought this would happen again. It's a Christmas miracle, except that it is the beginning of November. As I've stated previously, I went through a really bad reading slump this summer and have not read as much as I wanted to, like not nearly enough since that. But I have finally gotten back into reading again, and I think it was like fall came, the leaves started to shed, and so did my slump. I'm very excited because that means I have books to talk to you about, so we should just go ahead and get into it because while it's not that big of a list, I tend to ramble, so I'm just gonna shut myself up here right now. I cannot be bothered to remember what order I read these in, so we're just gonna go through this stack, and one of them was this book I read like in August, I want to say. This is The Chosen One by Echo Brown. This is an arc of Echo Brown's, I think it's going to be her second book, because I feel like she only has Black Girl Unlimited before that. So yeah, this is her second novel, and this one comes out in January, which I'm very excited for the rest of the world to have it because it was really, really good. I really enjoyed this. This is about a girl named Echo. I think she writes kind of like in a style where she's kind of autobiographical, but also it's fictional. I'm sure there's a word for that that's escaping me right now. I'm gonna pop it right here. But that's kind of what this style is, and it's about Echo's experience going to Dartmouth College. She's Black and she's a first-generation student, and so it's all about her trying to find her place in this institution that's not really accepting of her, that no one believes in her. Even her counselors at her high school didn't believe in her when she said she wanted to go to such an institution. And so it's kind of about her finding her place there, finding community, finding a safe space, finding possibly magical abilities. Oh, you didn't think I was going to throw in some fantasy, but I'm also surprised that there was fantasy in this. Basically, there are portals to different dimensions of time and space within this book, and Echo, as a chosen one, hence the title, kind of has control of opening and closing those portals, traveling through those different times, and it can help and hurt her life, like where she ends up, basically. But it's a lot of dealing with trauma, mental illness, self-worth, things like that. And this book was really good. If you like Legendborn, I'm not saying it's because it's a Black girl at college and there's magic, but it definitely did give me the same vibes as Legendborn, like the same enjoyment of reading it. So I would recommend this for sure. But like, they're not the same book at all. I just liked the academia vibes, Black girl magic that was woven into both of those books. The book that actually got me back into reading was Velvet Was the Night by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This book was not even like that good to me. I don't know why I was about to go off on a tangent. That seemed like a praise parade. It was not. I'm sorry if you can hear a bunch of stomping. I live below a 2-year-old and they just don't know how to walk. This book is a 1970s noir set in Mexico. It features a resistance group, government interference, a mob type group that is like kind of run by the government and is trying to shut down the resistance. It's all very interesting, and it's like taking real events that happened in the 1970s in this time and place. And I really, really enjoyed the historical aspect of it, and I really enjoyed the atmosphere. I think Silvia Moreno Garcia is so good at writing atmosphere. I didn't love the book overall, mainly because of the character development, I feel like. Like, Maite is our main character, and I just... Homegirl is just a little too desperate for love and affection, in my opinion, and I totally get where she's coming from, I do, but I just feel like there wasn't enough growth from her as a main character, that we spend so much time inside of her head. I wish I had seen a little more from her. I thought it was really interesting, and I was captured from the very beginning, and so I really do think this is like worth the read, but it is still not my favorite SMG book. That is still going to be Mexican Gothic. Possibly till the end of time. I still have to read a lot of her backlist, but I'm excited to figure out if Mexican Gothic is just like the most superior. It is the Michelangelo. It is the Sistine Chapel of her books. I read Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke, which is a short fiction like novella about this lonely woman who is feeling really just like insecure about herself, and she's got a lot going on at work and she's just very unhappy in life. She goes to this website trying to sell an apple peeler, and some person interacts with her in the forum that she creates and says like they're interested in buying it, and then they end up having a lot of discussions and like becoming kind of sort of friends and opening up to each other. But as you can see from this absolutely horrifying cover, it is a lot more than just pen pals talking to each other on the internet. This is a very dark story about manipulation and exploitation and just all this terrible stuff that happens in here. I honestly don't think it was that bad. I came into it thinking it was going to be a lot worse than it was, but there are some gory bits, some, you know, psychotic, like animal abuse kind of things that I didn't love to read about. So that's not why I gave this 3 stars. I just think overall I was kind of underwhelmed by everything that happened, even though I was also overwhelmed by some of the grosser things that happened. So I guess that doesn't really make sense. But personally, I expected more from something that I thought was going to be, like, this cover makes me want to gag. And I guess I did kind of, I'm not making any sense. I can't decide if it was gross enough or not gross enough. But I personally thought it was going to get a lot weirder than it did. And I think that's where that's where I didn't like it. It's like the ending was not for me. And I think it could have just really just gotten in there and did something really disturbing. And unfortunately, it didn't. So I still think it's worth a read, I guess. I really love the format. It takes place completely through, like, email. Right? Is that wrong? Yeah. It takes place completely through email. And so you get in, like, chat exchanges. So you get only their, like, conversations. And, you know, I liked it. I think it was a quick, fast read. Definitely eerie, but just expected a little more. I read Assembly by Natasha Brown. This was a September release that I really, really enjoyed. It's super short, as you can see. And this is basically about this woman who is struggling at work. I'm sensing a theme here. And she's just completely unhappy. She's surrounded by people who don't really see her, or they don't value her, especially at work. There's a guy who's sexually harassing her. At home, her white boyfriend is not really, she doesn't feel like she can really talk to him. She's a black woman, I don't know if I said that. But basically, so she just feels completely hopeless in a lot of ways. And on top of that, I don't want to spoil them in case they don't put it in here. They don't put it in here, so I'm not going to say it, but I don't know if it's necessarily a spoiler. But anyway, she's got some stuff going on. And at this point in her life, she's just like, do I, like, even try anymore? Or do I kind of just let life consume me and just be done with it? I hate it. I hate it so much. This was a very personal story, featuring a lot of microaggressions and things like that. So if you've read, like, Claudia Rankine's Citizen, that book I really loved. I definitely got those vibes from here. And it also reminded me of Queenie by Candace Carty-Williams because it features an interracial relationship. I read The Inheritance of Orquidea Divina, and unfortunately, while this was a fantastic book, I cannot do it justice and really talk about it the way that it needs to be talked about. I'm so sorry for all the stomping. I like this book a lot, but at the same time, I was just so... I blame it on reading the audiobook, I think. I kind of got sucked out of it because I started zoning out sometimes. But I really blame it on the fact that there was a circus in here, and I just don't like circuses. I don't like them. I won't read about them. I didn't like The Greatest Showman, so that must be a thing. That must have been my first hint that circuses are just not for me. So many people love that musical, and I'm just like, it was trash. It was absolute trash. Like, not even talking about how Barnum Bailey was actually racist, not even talking about, like, the way he treated the people in his show. I'm not talking about any of that. I just think the show, like, the actual movie, kind of sucked. And there were only, like, a few good bops in the movie musical. So that's why I'm like, Anyway, this is not about The Greatest Showman. This is also not even about a circus, but there is a circus element in the book, and I was just like, I'm not here for it. And I think that's when I started to dip out, because I was like, no, I don't care anymore. But other than that, this book was so freaking good. The writing is beautiful. I loved getting all of these different family members' perspective, because I thought it was just going to follow one girl, but it ends up following kind of several different people in the family, and I think that everyone was so unique. Everyone had such interesting backgrounds, especially the grandmother who we follow, who is Orquidea Divina. And so I loved everything up until that circus. And then I was like, I detached for some reason. I don't know what happened, but I can't fully, like, I still gave this 4 stars. And I think that I probably would have given it 5 stars if it had kept my interest, but unfortunately I'm a weirdo and it just didn't. But this was still super good, and I'm not actually like, don't listen to me is what I'm saying. Just don't listen to me, go read it. I read The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones, and this book was fantastic. I really, really loved how it was constructed. I loved every single character, like not like loved them, like I adored them and they were good people, but I loved being inside of their heads, trying to understand where they're coming from and what they're running from. So I really, really enjoyed this. I expected this to only be kind of a social commentary horror story, but it was more than that, and it really wove in its own culture. Honestly, I expected it to simply be the fact that the United States is bad because we've encroached on native land. Not encroached, we completely took over native land. It focuses more heavily on Native American folklore, which I thought was really interesting. And I was just overall really impressed by how the story was told because I was both sympathetic to the main character, but also kind of horrified by the main characters and just like didn't know what exactly to root for because they did some things and I can't support those things, and yet I also don't want them to die, you know? So that's all I'm going to say about this. I definitely think if you haven't read it, you've probably heard everyone else say you should read it. I am 100% in agreement with that statement. So me and some of the BookTube girlies had a little fun doing a Smutween readathon for the weekend of Halloween. So it was October 30th and 31st. And we just decided to read a bunch of smutty books because why not? And specifically like dark romances. There were prompts that I will not bother to talk about because I completed like most of them, but it's not, I got desperate and I just kind of used one book for most of them, which was this book, The Dare by Harley LaRue. I've talked about this on my channel before, so I really don't need to review it again because I read this back in January or February of 2021. So I'm not going to talk much about this because I've already talked about it, but it's still as good as I remember it being, if you wanted to know. This is one of the 2 books that I read for Smutween when I meant to read 4. But I don't know why I expected to do that because reading is hard. Reading is time consuming and you want to do other things in your day, even if you love reading, you know? So shout out to The Dare for carrying my Smutween on its back because she did the thing and they did the thing a lot in here. So that's all I have to say about that. This is rated M for mature. I also read a book called Seduced by Moonlight by Kenya Wright. And this book is about werewolves and a girl. She's a waitress in a small town and she kind of like hung back while her sister went off and did like big things at college. And she's just here. She's ready to leave the town, but she has to like wait for like things to come into place. This guy strolls in. He goes and sits down at the diner and he's like, oh, wow, we can't come back. I'm not explaining this well at all. And that's not important. My point is, there's a guy that comes in, there's instant attraction, they can't keep their eyes off of each other, but it can't be. We don't know why it can't be, but it can't be. And so, obviously they can't stay away from each other. Drama ensues, werewolves be werewolfing, alpha males be tripping a lot and doing some really gross things. And I say all that, but I still enjoyed this book. So I think I gave it 3 stars because I feel like you can do the werewolf thing without making the dude be kind of bleh. Like, you can do the werewolf thing without being like, oh, you're never gonna come back to this place again. You have to come and live with me forever. You know what I mean? That wasn't well explained. But basically, there are things in there that I'm just like, ugh. You don't have to be, like, slightly toxic. Just be a good dude who's also a dog. That's fine. So yeah, there are definitely some red flags with this male love interest that I don't support. But overall, the story was super hot. And that's kind of what's important. And I think that it did a really good job of balancing out the subplot with the romance because we're mostly here for the romance. We don't really care about why the witches are bad and why we have to rip the witch's heart out and how they're all in some sort of war. I don't care about all that. I just want to see 2 people in love. And so that's what it did for me. And I should mention that the woman in the story is a Black woman. So like it's written by a Black author, Black protagonist, werewolf. I thought he was light-skinned Black, but he's not. He's just a white guy, which was sad. But, you know, he was still hot. I can't deny it. And this book also had illustrations, which I didn't know until I started reading it. And I was like, oh, it's a graphic novel. That was really good. Anyway, it's a graphic. Okay, sorry y'all, I'm in a silly goofy mood.
Oh Lord, I'm sorry. I'm just in a silly goofy mood.
I still have more books to talk about. Let's get on with this. Anyway, I gave it 3 stars. I'm definitely gonna read the sequel. I had a really good time reading it, so don't knock it till you try it, y'all. Don't knock it till you try it. The last few books I'm gonna talk about, I read all of them while I was doing a speculative... Why do I talk so fast? The last books that I'm going to talk about I read during a speculative fiction reading vlog, which I've already posted and you can go watch, so I'm not going to spend too much time on them. One of them was Lakewood by Megan Giddings, and I gave this one 3 stars. I think it was a pretty solid premise that kind of I was expecting more from, and so I didn't super enjoy this. It's about this young woman whose grandmother dies and her mom has cancer, and she is in a really bad situation where she's in college and she can barely afford college as it is, and she can't afford all these medical bills, funeral expenses, all these things. And so she leaves her education and goes to this research facility to work for them, essentially being a patient, like a participant in studies. And so these studies, she notices like everyone in the study is a person of color. All the people who are running the study are white people, and it's freaking her out a little bit, but she's like, whatever, like I'm gonna get so much money out of this, I'm not even gonna question it. And naturally, when you see that kind of dynamic, it makes you question everything going on. And unfortunately, some crazy stuff happens in here that these participants have to endure, and all for the sake of money. It's definitely like something that I think it was interesting that I read this right after watching Squid Game. This is not a new concept at all, like people doing things because they're desperate for money, but I just thought it was like a funny sequence of events or whatever. So yeah, it's kind of the same themes of poverty driving you to do things that you don't really want to do, but you're in a desperate situation, and how capitalism, whoever's in charge, the oppressive force, will use that against you to exploit you into doing what they want you to do. It's also about medical racism and the lack of humanity that people of color are treated with when they are receiving care, or if they're being treated like test subjects, which is what happens in this book. So I think that it was a really, really strong idea, but it just did not deliver exactly what it needed to. Feel free to go hear some of my other thoughts on this in the vlog that I put up. Then we have The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor LaValle, and I absolutely love this book. It's a short novella that takes place in the 1920s in New York City, and it's following this guy named Charles Thomas Tester, who is a black man living in a time where, you know, it's not really fun to be a black man. This guy is just a musician who likes to carry around his guitar, perform, get a little coin, and go about his day. But of course, some white guy comes up to him and gets him involved in something he didn't know he was going to be involved in. And from there, a whole thing ensues. There's magic, there's monsters, there's a near apocalypse, and it was really, really good. I love the atmosphere of the book, the moral message of it. This is a retelling of H.P. Lovecraft's The Horror at Red Hook, and it is basically kind of reversing the situation in which Lovecraft wrote this super racist story about how immigrants were coming to the country and completely ruining the city. It's kind of like how Trump said, oh, these people who are coming over the border, they're sending their worst. They're not sending their doctors and their whatevers. And you know, the same vibe, same energy. But The Ballad of Black Tom is not about that. It takes those elements and then it flips it into something else entirely, and I thought it was really, really, really good. I love a book that does that. If you have recommendations, I would love those, and I'm sure I need to read more of Victor LaValle because he probably does it again in another story, but if you know anything else other than Victor LaValle who does that kind of same thing, please let me know because I really want to read it. I also read Foe by Ian Reid, again another book I talked about in my vlog, which you can go hear more in-depth thoughts on in the vlog. But I really like this. I think I'm going to settle on a 4-star for this one. I didn't like it as much as I'm thinking of ending things, but I do know that I went into this expecting it to be a horror book, and it is not a horror book. It is sci-fi thriller-esque? I wouldn't even go that far with it, honestly. It's just, I don't know what to call this. But yeah, definitely don't go into this thinking it's scary or anything like his first book. This is his second book, by the way, because it is not anything like that. I read Night of the Mannequins by Stephen Graham Jones. This is like a short fiction slasher story, I guess. I didn't really like it personally. I thought that it tells you it's going to be one thing and then it's not that thing, and that's fine, I guess, if it wasn't a completely dumb idea. I read Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney, and I loved this book. 5 stars. Really would recommend this thriller. I think I really love books that follow falling apart relationships, and this is one of those books for sure. And it was intriguing from the beginning. The characters were super interesting. Like, one of them has facial blindness, so he can never recognize his wife, and he can't recognize anyone around him, and that really comes into play throughout the story, and I just think it was so cool. I just had a great time. My only complaint about this book was that I felt like it was so rushed at the end, as in there's like all this lead up and then the climax is like 2 pages, maybe even 1 page, 2 pages, maybe a little more, but 2 pages is what it felt like. And I'm just like, oh, that was it? Like, we're just gonna move past that and now we're jumping into the future? Really? That's lame. So I was not happy with that part of it, but overall I was like completely invested until we got to the end. I was like, what is going to happen to these people? Why are they here? What is going on? And I was pleasantly surprised to find out what happened. I also read Dune by Frank Herbert, and I will never read this book again. That's all I have to say about that. Thanks for watching. No, I'm kidding. I think that there are some really good things about this book and some really not good things about this book. There's some badass women in here, but there's also misogyny in here. There's a really interesting system as far as like the world building and how everything works, but then you're also like lacking the perspective of the people that matter most to me, in my opinion. And if you're getting their perspective, it's through a white guy named Paul. Why is his name Paul? That's also one of my things. A lot of people have discussed how Herbert kind of appropriated North African and Middle Eastern cultures to create this story and this lore, and how it made people uncomfortable, which is not something I can personally speak to because I don't know enough about it, but I can totally understand where they're coming from. And also, there's just like a lot of stuff, like this whole thing is about colonizing a planet, and while the main character is not necessarily about that life, it just felt like he kind of reluctantly accepted a role where he was supposed to lead these people because they couldn't do it on their own. And then there's also the portrayal of like the main villain in the story, who's supposed to be this guy who's like a pedophile attracted to young boys, and it's just like you can clearly see the 1960s homophobia creeping into this. Not even creeping. It's completely like submerged. The book is submerged in it. So, I don't know. There were definitely a lot of issues, which, yes, you can blame on it being from the 1960s, like how he portrays women. While I thought some parts were kind of impressive, and I was like, yeah, that's good for the 1960s, I still think, oh, you thought you did something there, but you could have gone harder. So yeah, overall, I wasn't entirely displeased with this book. I think there were a lot of really interesting plot points in here, even though it took like 70 years to get to them a lot of the time, because there is just so much talking in this book and not enough doing. I can excuse racism, but slow pace, that's just not for me. There's just a lot in this book that didn't need to be in there, or at least it could have been broken up into several books rather than having this gigantic tome. I think that would have helped a lot with the pacing, with my enjoyment of the story, and also just like logistically, it doesn't make sense the way kind of the book is broken up. There's a book 1, there's a book 2, and there's a book 3, and I just think that it could have just been 2 books, and then the last part could have been in another book, as in like another physical book, not in this book. Does that make sense? You get what I mean. Again, I don't think this was a terrible story, and I don't think that you're a bad person if you like Dune. I totally see the appeal. I really liked certain aspects of the story, but for me, this was just like, I don't know if it's my attention span, or maybe because I don't annotate my books like every single page, and so it's just not meant for people with a lack of analytical brain. But I just didn't overall enjoy it that much. And I definitely suffered through it so that I could watch the movie, which I still haven't even seen, and it's been out for 2 weeks now. So these are some of the things that I've been reading lately. I didn't mention everything because who has the time, but you know, these are some ones that stood out to me, and you should check them out if you're interested. And if you've read any of them already, please let me know how you felt about them in the comments. I'd love to hear your opinions. Also in the comments, if you could leave a Statue of Liberty emoji, that'd be great. I ended up wearing this on Halloween because I felt FOMO. I went to a haunted house with some friends, and some people were dressing up, and I was like, oh, well, I wasn't going to dress up for this, but now I'm here and I want to, so I ran to a pharmacy, I picked up a little hat, and I called myself a Statue of Liberty. So leave a little Statue of Liberty down in the comments if you made it this far in the video. I hope you had a happy Halloween. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you loved it. Yeah, that makes sense. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more from me, and I will talk to you in another video soon. Bye!